Hey everybody, this is Curtis. Sorry if you were watching my previous video. I ended it because I wasn't sure if it was working. So I was like, fuck this shit, let me just end it. Because I didn't know if it was working or not. So I was like, Anywho, but it's working. So, I didn't want to be talking, because I could babble on, as my wife says, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, the topic tonight is going to be death OCD, race-based trauma, exposure therapy, which is something I've had experience with, and death OCD is something I've had experience with as well too. Um, and talk about I guess PTSD, just mental health. Because I know for a lot of us, particularly Black folks living in America, we've been going through it, and it's kind of been tough on me and tough on I think a lot of people. Um, just with Trump being in office and all these police killings and the recent acquittal of Breonna Taylor's murderers. And this show is dedicated to her. Rest in power to her. It's a sad story. You know, but that's the system. The system was never designed to produce justice. It was only designed to expand and maintain white supremacy. Um, but it's still sad nonetheless. But I know, thanks to COVID, which I have my thoughts on, and it being a scam, but I don't have to get deep into that. But the reality is that shit has been shut down. A lot of us are isolating, for safety reasons, whether I agree with it or not. We're isolating and we're kind of staying at home and doing a lot of Zoom calls and virtual hugs and all this shit. But there's also an increased amount of suicides. There's a lot of people struggling with depression. They're taking a lot, antidepressants use has increased. A lot of people taking anti-anxiety pills. And for Black folks, we're dealing with the COVID shit, and along with living under white supremacy in America. So and constantly being re-traumatized, re-triggered. It's every single fucking week. It's a new shooting. So I mean, I know it's been a lot. It's been a lot on me personally. As some of you may know, I have, I've always been kind of talked about physical health and just holistic health for a long time. On my Instagram and Facebook and YouTube, I've done conferences, but I myself, had struggled with for years untreated OCD, and I talk about that in some of my videos on YouTube. You can check out. But yeah, I had OCD, and I had it for years. And I had only recently last year that I recently got treatment for it. And and I did something known as exposure therapy, which I will talk about. But I wanted to do this video just to kind of provide some insight, perspectives on race-based trauma. Which kind of is a form of PTSD. I call PTSD police terrorism stress disorder, because that's what a lot of us are dealing with. There was a really good documentary by my friend Jackie Olive. It's on PBS. Can't think of the name of it now. She talked about basically it's a documentary about lynchings, and it was talking about how you had the actual lynching, but then you had the aftermath. Because lynchings were a form of terrorism. It was a way of controlling and dominating, and subverting and subduing Black people. Particularly in the South. And it talked about a story of how this woman, I think her husband was lynched, something like that, and she just was traumatized. Just she drank all the time. She became really kind of hostile towards her kids. She was just really traumatized. I was just watching this little Hulu series called Woke or whatever. It's interesting, whatever, just something to watch. Some entertainment. And the brother, he experienced that, like the police brutality, guns pointed at him, and like he started hearing all these thoughts, and I feel like for a lot of us, we deal with that, and unfortunately, because our lives don't matter in society, definitely our mental health doesn't matter. So when we go to the doctor and we tell them about how we're feeling, anxiety, depression, stress, they just want to give us a pill, which is not going to solve the issue. I mean, it may help us kind of bring some of the anxiety or depression down, but a lot of times, the drugs end up killing you. A lot of those drugs, particularly those psychiatric drugs, they cause suicide. So you're taking the depression to prevent suicide. You're taking the medication to prevent suicide and to help you through depression, and that ends up causing suicide. particularly SSRI drugs. So, race-based trauma is a real thing. It is a form of PTSD. It's not something that's widely discussed in this country, because it's not really, again, it's like our pain, our suffering, particularly Black people's pain, our suffering is always minimalized. It's trivialized. It's like, oh, just get over it. Slavery was 200 years ago. Jim Crow. It's always trivialized. Just like when you go to a doctor, studies show that Black patients are much less more likely to receive painkillers than our white patients. For these different, painful, diseases or conditions that, where painkillers may be appropriate. So again, our pain is trivialized, and our mental pain in particular. And as a Black man, grew up in America, me personally, I've dealt with race-based trauma. Kind of a little bit of background on my history. Grew up outside of Philadelphia, in a mostly all-white suburbs. I went to pretty much all-white Catholic schools. Interesting fact about where I grew up is called name of the actual place is called Bucks County, but the name of the town is called Ben Salem. It was pretty much a sundown town. And for those of you who've seen Lovecraft Country, the HBO series, talks a lot about sundown towns, but kind of doesn't provide the full scope of understanding of sundown towns, because a lot of sundown towns were actually up north. It's very rare that sundown towns were like in the South. They do exist in the South, but mostly they were in the North and Midwest. They did not exist, in the South. But yeah, I grew up in pretty much, it was like all white county, because Philadelphia is like, almost 50% Black. But this little area right outside Philadelphia was like majority white. And I think in 1957, I think the first Black family that moved into Bucks County, they had their house firebombed. And there's a town called Levittown. And Levittown was developed by this developer by name of Levitt. I think this Jewish developer by name of Levitt. And he was racist. He developed all these different properties for FHA right after World War II, and it was very explicit. These little kind of pristine suburbs are for white folks only. So it's actually a town called Levittown. So that's kind of like the history of area I grew up in. Again, I didn't really know this growing up, because I'm just a kid and whatever. I'm just a kid, so I don't really understand everything of the world, and just why I'm always being called the N-word, and being mistreated or discriminated against, and kind of feeling, being told I was ugly. I heard all those things as a child. And, trauma is something that for most of us starts off at an early age. It's, of course, you can experience trauma at like any point in your life, but, most of us and most of our behavior, most of our behaviors, most of our addictions, most of our dysfunctions, whatever it is we deal with, is rooted oftentimes in childhood trauma. And, I had traumatic events, throughout my childhood, and race-based trauma was a part of that. Just kind of the whole feeling of being ostracized, not feeling like I had to fit in, or not feeling like I could fit in. And then kind of from there, kind of seeking people's approval, and, just be transparent, even seeking white people's approval, because that's the environment I was raised in. So yeah, and then of course later on in life, dealing with police encounters and all this shit, I'm saying, I've been stopped plenty of times and been falsely accused by this white girl actually, of robbery. The trauma becomes something that it becomes like layers to it, and it really can affect us. So then we have something like a death of George Floyd, where it's like a public lynching, then that could just kind of really set people over the edge. I do know for a fact that, if I've talked to people, like, they're like, man, I don't want to leave the house, man. I'm just scared to leave the house. You know what I'm saying? I don't want nothing to happen to me, be me killed by the police. And there's many of us that struggle with that. And, it's something that there's nothing to be ashamed about. Because we are living in we're living under terrorism. Country was founded by terrorists. It was founded by Columbus. He was a terrorist. So that's kind of been a dominant experience of Black people for the past 400 years of living in the Western Hemisphere. So and I know and even for me, like again, when everything popped up with George Floyd, It's like my trauma was definitely triggered. And and I tried to just not watch the news, and I live here in kind of in the city of Atlanta. They had helicopters every fucking night. Just hear nonstop helicopters all like literally for a fucking month. You heard nonstop helicopters and goddamn fireworks. And again, I mean that was definitely intentional. That was designed to kind of quell the protest movement. Again, to further traumatize and terrorize people. But that's you heard that Rashad Brooks got killed maybe like 5 minutes from where I live, so I was having a rough time, but for me, and again, kind of talking about exposure therapy, because I will talk about my experience with death OCD because it's all kind of related. So for me, for a lot of people who deal with like any type of trauma or like any type of traumatic stress disorder, it's easy to kind of like you adopt certain, so you start to have a lot of intrusive thoughts. Along with that, you have a lot of anxiety. So oftentimes, they want to give you Prozac and different things like that. I can't speak on. I don't recommend it. I remember, when I struggled with OCD, that was one of the things that a lot of people recommended. I didn't take it because I wasn't comfortable with the side effects. I just did a lot of research on mental health, and I don't really. I was like, well, hey, I excuse me, I can fuck with some CBD oil. You know what I'm saying? But I ain't fucking with all this little medication. I'm good. You know, but it can be easy to engage in avoidance. Avoidance of whatever traumatizing you, whatever you feel triggered by. Again, if you have that particular type of condition. So one of the, a really effective protocol for PTSD and also OCD is something known as ERP, or exposure therapy. It's actually known as exposure ritual prevention therapy. And basically the whole premise of it is that, you get traumatized and your brain just kind of like latches onto that trauma and just runs like constant feedback loops. You know what I'm saying? You have constant, intrusive or negative thoughts, So for example, if you're a woman, who got, sexually abused as a child, you may have PTSD from that experience. And like, you might feel triggered anytime you see a man or, if the guy wore a certain perfume, you feel triggered by that. And, the premise of exposure therapy is to, is for you to, is to, those things exist and they're going to exist. And unfortunately you can't control those things. But in order to kind of minimize the fear and help your brain kind of reset, it could be really therapeutic to kind of expose yourself to those feared situations or objects. So that's something that I did, when I was in therapy. I kind of learned about how this kind of worked because I struggled with death OCD. And I feel like that was a part of it as well too, because a lot of my death OCD was like about being killed by a white person or being like lynched or, like these really kind of like, almost, oftentimes terrifying and traumatic, thoughts that I was having. And I do think, because there's a really good documentary called, I think, Sex, Lies, and Murder. I forget the name of it. It's on Amazon Prime, but it talks about segregation stress syndrome and how the experience of, lynchings, Jim Crow, segregation, it left a lot of Black people, who were born at that time or maybe went through those experiences, this heightened sense of fear. And one of the fears was like a heightened sense of death. It was always like, death was like right around the corner. And for a lot of our ancestors, I mean, that was the reality. Because at any point, we could be killed just for like, just for fucking whistling at a white woman. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's what happened with Emmett Till. I mean, just, whistling at her or just looking at her the wrong way. So, I do feel like, maybe some ancestral trauma might have been passed down from future generations that kind of like maybe, maybe predisposed me to that and into getting, death OCD in particular. But, it was something that, I remember like last year, I just like, I was had like a lot of intrusive thoughts about dying. I was like, and I was scared to like, I would get dizzy a lot. And it wasn't like a kind of a physical dizziness. It was more like psychogenic dizziness. And I would get dizzy and I would go to the chiropractor and, man, what's going on? Give me an adjustment. And, and I would be like constantly checking my pulse, like, am I about to die? So, and it was like a real scary thing, but I learned like, okay, if you have that fear, then, it's important to kind of face that fear. But again, not to do it like kind of in a therapeutic way, not in an old cliche way, like, oh, if you're afraid of it, kind of face it, but kind of in a therapeutic way, because I know for me, again, in this kind of OCD language, OCD stands for, just to kind of give you clinical terms. It stands for obsessive compulsive disorder. Obsessive compulsive disorder. So basically, it's a situation where people may have intrusive thoughts about about dying, or about anything. They could have thoughts about like germs on the table, something like that. So they have obsessive thoughts, and that leads to like certain compulsions. So the compulsion is like maybe it might be like showering for like several hours a day, or like constantly checking doors, see if you lock them. I mean, you can get like a myriad of different behaviors to kind of as a way of kind of either minimizing the anxiety or kind of like feeding into it, if you will. So yeah, and it could be like a really debilitating disorder. From it, it can cause them, people suicide, and it can cause a lot of like serious issues. Um, yeah, so yeah, so that's kind of what OCD is. It is an anxiety disorder, just like kind of like PTSD. And the way you kind of like break that cycle, because OCD is a cycle. You just have, just you have intrusive thoughts, you have the compulsion, just it's a cycle of dysfunction, really. For some, it could be a cycle of death, because where they ultimately die. To break the cycle, you have to like, again, like kind of like face your fears in a kind of in a safe, therapeutic approach, and you have to stop the compulsions. And then that's what kind of like allows your brain to heal by when you do that. Because otherwise, like you're just constantly like in constant feedback loop and feedback mode, if you will. And yeah, so I mean, and for and I think for a lot of us, who maybe deal with some type of some type of stress disorder that's rooted in trauma, we're constantly being triggered. But I think it is, and again, I'm not, I'm not a mental health professional, but it is important, particularly if you're going to go kind of the exposure route, which again is a form of treatment for PTSD. It is important to expose yourself to these things in a helpful manner, in a therapeutic manner, and to seek out help if necessary. Because I know for me, it got to be a point where my OCD was kind of impacting my life. It was impacting my sleep. It was impacting a lot of areas of my life, where I just, I wasn't myself. And, and I wasn't really even fully aware of how much I wasn't myself until I actually got to therapy. And I was like, damn, like, I'm just totally, like, just kind of off my values and just, away from who I truly am. Yeah, what I'm saying? I mean, that's kind of like one of the most painful things to kind of realize that, you've been dealing with something all this time that's kind of, made you not yourself. You know what I'm saying? Because, I've been on a journey where I've tried to be myself, tried to be that authentically. And to feel like, hey, I was dealing with something that, was kind of taking me away from that was just maybe it was a tough pill to swallow. But yeah, exposure therapy. It's a really, really, it can be hard. It can be hard as shit because like you're exposing yourself to things that are like scary. You know what I'm saying? So if you're scared of death, and you're scared of whatever, like you're watching, like videos of people dying, and watching videos of of lynchings perhaps. I mean, again, it all varies with the person, because one exposure for me may be something different for another person, but it can be a very effective way to kind of to heal, and just kind of manage your anxiety and manage your trauma in a lot more helpful way. Because I know for a lot of us, we go to addiction, to social media and Facebook and Twitter, you know what I'm saying? And get on our fucking phone, whatever. We find different ways to kind of to self-soothe, self-medicate. But it doesn't really it oftentimes takes us away from who we really are and doesn't make anything any better. So, yeah, that's something that I just wanted to kind of elucidate on because something that really, has really had a really meaningful impact on me. And, it's something that, mental health is something that I really want to start touching on more because, particularly for Black people, because I know it's something that a lot of us, a lot of us we struggle with, and it's kind of, and oftentimes, due to Christianity, it's like, oh, just pray about it. You know what I'm saying? It's not like a real kind of like, dissection of, what's really going on, what's some of the core beliefs behind, maybe some of the people's mental health conditions, what's the trauma, what happened, even for me, because like when I was in therapy, like, I didn't really kind of delve into that. It was kind of like, okay, just help me with the anxiety. But, I realized that there's some, there were some traumas that were kind of maybe pushing me to have, this full blown, pushing me in the past to have a full blown OCD. So yeah, that's all. That's all I wanted to kind of elucidate on. Again, race-based trauma is a real thing. For those of you who maybe, kind of like feeling like, man, yeah, I've been kind of like struggling with all the, I've been like really depressed, or, it's no shame in getting help. There's no shame in saying, hey, I need some help. And for those of you maybe lucky enough to still have a job, work from home, there's a lot of great like Black therapists out there that can really help you kind of process a lot of this shit. Because I feel like for a lot of us, we've experienced, Black people living in America have experienced so much, we never really had time to process, but we're living under capitalism as well too. We're not just living under white supremacy, we're under capitalism. So it's always like, just the whole grind culture and 9 to 5 and taking care of, what I'm saying? So we don't have a lot of times, we don't have process, just kind of like just to sit back and meditate and just, okay, what the fuck did I just like witness? You know what I'm saying? Like, a lot of it, like, like a lot of us only have time to mourn the people that we lose, due to, structural racism or, whatever, capitalism, white supremacy, etc. So, yeah, but it is a real thing and it can impact your life, but, there are therapeutic protocols such as exposure therapy, again, known as, ERP, exposure ritual prevention therapy, that can, assist you with that. And yeah, that's all, I'm going to say, if anyone has any questions, I can take some questions now if you want to post something in the comments. I was trying to be succinct and talk about my experience and race-based trauma, death, OCD, but again, race-based trauma, is a form of PTSD. So, it is a real thing. So yeah, but, anyone has any questions, I can maybe take a few questions you want to post in the comments. Thank you all for watching this video. I just felt inspired to kind of talk about this because I know in the month of June, I was really, myself, I was really struggling. Like, but I was like, okay, I kind of, started doing my therapy, and kind of got some help, reached out to my therapist, and they gave me some great advice and, kind of insights. And I was like, okay, and I started kind of just leaning into things I was afraid of. And I started going to different protests and, to kind of, show support for the cause. So, and, things kind of improved for me, in that realm. So, yeah. So Corey Allen, what's up, cuz? How you doing, fam? What do you think the solution is? Well, brother, the solution, man, America's got to go, man. This whole system's got to be destroyed. Of course, I'm talking about kind of like piecemeal solutions right now. But end of the day, this whole capitalism, America got to go. You know what I'm saying? We ain't never gonna be free. The society that we're living in is structurally designed to make people sick, and to make people mentally sick as well too. Just all the terrorism and the hierarchies and the inequality. Think about it. You have motherfuckers. The government just gave $19 trillion like to like the wealthiest Americans and gave like the rest of us fucking $1,200. Like, what I'm saying? Like that's a recipe like for chaos. And studies have shown that the higher the amount of inequality within society, the more anxiety disorders there are, the more depression there is. The more stratified a society is, the more there is a kind of like a have and a have not. That's like a really strong indicator of how sick a society is. So for me, this whole system gotta go. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't, it's gotta go. Civilization, and that's a whole nother like deep conversation. Because what I will say is that, I oftentimes I get depressed a lot by everything that you see in the world, but I'm grateful to know that none of this shit is natural. I'm grateful to know that. I'm grateful to know that everything that we see that's fucked up in the world has only been around for like 10,000 years. It wasn't until like the age of agriculture, when human beings started farming. Because before we were hunters and gatherers, there might have been maybe about 2 million people on the planet total. Now there's about 7 billion. There might have been 2 million people on the planet. There was no war. There was no private property. There was no fighting. There was no fucking child. No pedophilia. All the things that we like consider to be normal and natural. are really just products of like of a social experiment known as civilization, which came about when human beings started farming. Because before we were just hunters and gatherers, like we hunted and we gathered. You know what I'm saying? Like we were no fucking wage slavery. We weren't answering no goddamn boss. I mean, there was no fucking boss. So I mean, it's there was no white people. There was no black. The whole concept of race didn't exist, and there was no reason to fight and to try to control and dominate. One group try to control and dominate another group because it's like, okay, everything is in abundance. Like, what I'm saying? Like, why fight? Why fight over something that I don't own? Why fight? When okay, like, hey, there's plenty of food. There's no property. There's nothing like really. There's nothing for us to defend. Why fight? And there's only 2 million people on the planet total. I mean, it's I mean, it wasn't. There was a lot less crowding. There was a lot less, interactions between these different hunter-gatherer groups. But it was just like a whole. There's a really good book. I think. What was it? Guns, Germs, and Steel. It kind of talks about some of those things and how one group of people came to dominate the planet. It wasn't because they're superiors, because agriculture kind of came in that region closer. Another good book called Sex at Dawn that talks about that. Just how human beings kind of evolved from hunter gatherers until and then we became civilized, and pretty much from there we've been on the decline. There is no such thing as progress that as we know it. As far as infant mortality, life expectancy, I mean, there really is no progress. We think, because I can talk on a cell phone right now, and I can do a fucking virtual hug. Like, that's not progress. You know what I'm saying? Particularly for a species that is very much wholly dependent upon physical touch and connection and community. You know what I'm saying? So that's why like all this COVID shit, it's like a weird little kind of social engineering experiment that's kind of being, it's fucked up, but it's like, these motherfuckers are intentionally destroying people's mental health and their capacities, over some illusionary virus. That's another topic. But that's my answer. That's my answer, cuz much love to you. Thank you for watching, bro. I was kind of giving you a short answer, because that's kind of question. I could do a whole fucking video on that. But yeah, so I mean, that's my thoughts on that. So, but I will conclude here. Thank you again for watching. I'll post this on maybe on my Facebook page, and I'll post it on YouTube. I'm going to do more mental health videos. But again, the best thing I could say is, if you have, if you struggle with something, don't feel ashamed. Because I know for me, I had a lot of shame about what I was dealing with. I kind of felt like I was a failure, and I was bad, and something was wrong with me, and that, overcoming all that was kind of really pivotal in me finally getting treatment. But there's nothing wrong with you, and I just encourage you, particularly if you have the resources right now, to definitely invest in that, because unfortunately, I see things getting kind of worse and worse from a societal standpoint, and if you don't have the tools to kind of help you manage that stress and anxiety, then things can kind of really build up to where you explode, on someone you love, on yourself. So peace and love, y'all. Hope enjoy the rest of your night. Look forward to doing more videos. Hopefully this was helpful, and we'll definitely connect soon.